Welcome to Higher Ed Athletics. Today, I'm joined by the Kent State University Athletic Director, Randale Richmond. Randale, thanks for being on the podcast.
Absolutely. Happy to be here and looking forward to the journey we're about to go on here, Travis.
That's right. Well, one thing I always start off with is just an institutional profile. Anyone that doesn't know your institution and your athletic department, well known in the MAC, obviously, but maybe just mostly about the institution size, things like that.
Yeah, Kent State University, about 22,000 undergrads. We have 7 regional campuses that serve the greater Northeast Ohio area. Here on the Kent main campus, when we have the 22 undergrads, graduate programs, over 300 opportunities at different degrees here. And if you had to encapsulate Kent State University, I would say it's access, development, and completion. That's the goal. Here at Kent State University, and the environment is pretty eclectic. When we talk about DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, I think the thing that Kent State does the best, you have to be there, as well as belonging. You can find your speed here at Kent State University, and as you're learning to explore and develop yourself, you have other people around who assist you on that journey. It is a high level first generation student serving institution. So that is something that is very near and dear to my heart, yours as well. Travis, being a first generation college graduate, and Kent State does that extremely well. So when we talk about access development, that's why you want to end in completion. So that's the overall profile of Kent State University.
You did your homework. You knew I was a first gen too. It's confusing times when you think back to that. So I do think that being a serving institution like that is really critical. One thing I gotta say on the athletic side, we had a little back and forth on Twitter when I went to the IU softball game. That looked cool, the red versus the powder blue. And
That's right.
That was a crazy way to end a softball game.
Oh my goodness, man. Hey, listen, I'll tell you what, performers perform when it's time to perform. And, the young lady who you guys had come up there hit a dinger. Boy, she hit a bomb out there. And that's a cool way to end it. Of course, I was rooting for those golden flashes to get it done, especially when we donned the powder blues, right? But at the end of the day, your lady stepped up, had a good time for your program, and it was an exciting finish.
Yeah, we
heartbreaking for us, exciting for you and everybody else who was watching.
Yeah, we had a little help from the wind. That was like our first warm day in Indiana. We haven't had one since then, I feel like, but yeah, it's just the athletics is thriving there too, and then those uniforms are just awesome.
Appreciate that.
So I try to pride myself on asking questions that are, one, interesting to me and that will be interesting to other people, but also ones that you don't get asked all the time.
Yeah.
But before we move on to that, so I do listen to other podcasts to learn from, and Mike Hamilton from the Chair is one that I was glad he rebooted, even just because there's so much great content that he puts out. That's and true. You did have this one on there. He asked you about preparing for the interview, and you had an incredible story about how you prepared for the Kent State interview. For those that aren't aware, you spent I think a decade at Kent State before, so you had the background of the institution. But as far as for this job, if you could maybe retell that story, and then that's the only one I think that will duplicate. But it was a great story, so I wanted people to listen to it.
Yeah, no stress. At the end of the day, the preparation started years ago. At the end of the day, I remember getting to this enterprise, and as I already stated, being a first generation college student, you have no idea what's behind the veil over here. So getting an opportunity to work as a graduate assistant in compliance in academics, that began the journey of figuring out what exactly was behind these walls. So I remember asking back then, like, hey, what's the highest it goes to? People, hey, what do you want to do? Well, I don't know. What's the highest this goes to? For athletic director. Yeah, I want to do that. You had no idea what that truly entailed or truly meant, but that started the journey. And I had great mentors and just great people along the way who gave me perspective. So then it began, okay, I got into the Ncaa Leadership Institute in 2014, ended up graduating in 2015. And that's when a lot of it started to make sense to me, because in that institute, you really begin to develop your why. And that's when I started to understand the foundation of what I needed in order to get this opportunity to be in the chair, and why I wanted to be in the chair, and the impact that I wanted to have on people. So from then, I began to, whether it was something in the Division I ticker, or it was something that I came across from going to Lead One's Leadership Institute, or going to College Athletics Leadership Symposium, all these different places, I would just take copious notes from all the different athletic directors and commissioners and people within the industry who were up there. And, I began to just, my why is to be a transformational leader who has a positive impact on people's lives that resonates well beyond sports. So I try to do that in those environments. I was like, hey, I took all these notes. If they could serve you one day, here you are. And as I was doing that for different people in the industry, I created a folder called Path to the AD Chair. And I still got that folder today, electronic folder. In each area, I will put something different about this opportunity and what it would mean. So whether it was a press conference and things that people talked about going into a private school or going to a public school, or whether it was about a coaching hire and how this is going to make this region better, or if it's something I was dealing with multimedia rights, I had no idea what that space was, but I'll dump it in that folder. And there were things that I was doing on campus in terms of diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, or things I was doing in terms of revenue generation, things that I was doing in terms of evaluations of coaches and staff. It would go into a different folder within this document. So then once I had that and this opportunity came about, then the prep started. There's so many notes in my iPhone, that are just different topics about how to craft a conversation or how to articulate your purpose, and as I'm going through that process, I'm reaching out to just different colleagues and they're just giving me perspective on these things. And the best advice I got throughout the time of interviewing for this job came from Jeff Hathaway. And accumulation of over 15 years of all this information, how are you going to articulate it when you get that hour meeting? And really the first 5 minutes is you just tell them who you are. Next 45 is them peppering you with questions. And you got 5 minutes after that to land the plane, right? How are you going to get all this information that has been accumulating over the years into this package? He said, concise and precise, Randale. I've never seen anybody win a interview off the first 5 minutes, but I've seen people lose it. So you want to make sure that you're concise and precise. And as I had that map, another person who was very helpful for me was Eric Wood, the athletic director at La Tech, in terms of the scope and spectrum of how he organized his thoughts. I took a template from him and just applied it to my thinking process. And every story that I had around fundraising, every story I had about leadership, or every story I had about a difficult situation, every story about being a campus collaborator and cross-campus partner, every story about a community, I would write them down, just keywords that can help me remember the stories. And then as I would refine the process, I would then hone in and bold the ones that I thought were the key ones to go with. So I was basically creating this external electronic brain map to help me be able to pull stories so I could be concise and precise. So all that time, all that information, all that data gathered over the decades and years, I was able to then articulate it in a succinct fashion. And then after that, it either is going to align with the institution you're looking to have an opportunity to lead, or it won't. And I'll feel very comfortable because I realized that I did articulate who I am, what my purpose is, and what the plans were for success.
Yeah. See, that's when I first envisioned creating this podcast, stuff like that was just like the stuff that I'd like to share with people because, Trey Scott from Grambling State, he shared with me, actually, so I did a combo episode with him and the president told me that Trey put together like a book heading into the interview of similar ideas like that.
Yeah.
And I told him I want to see that book, and you got to get that thing scanned so we can put those resources up for people. But that's why it stuck out to me when you were on From the Chair and explained that. I'm the same way as far as notes. I have OneNote in my phone, the app. It is it's like my bibliography of my life and research and what I want to do. So, if people are not taking notes down, they need to be doing it. And if you don't want to have a pen and paper handy, get your iPhone out and just organize it and just write down a note and get to it later. One thing that as a training to be a researcher, qualitative researcher, that stood out what you said is you collected all this data. A lot of people do that. They collect notes, but you learned how to put some analysis behind it and actually concise it to an interview. Because if you could have all this data, but then like you said, you have an hour. And there's some people that I've been able to not really participate, but witness some interviews. And when I was at Indiana State, Sherrod Clinkscales, who's still the athletic director there, he did a great job on his interview, and he was well prepared, but it was just so concise and to the point, and it didn't make everyone happy with the things he was saying probably, but he had a vision and he clearly did his homework. And so people like you, and then obviously Dr. Wood he's a higher ed athletics podcast former guest whenever he was still at Central Florida or UCF. I can't call it Central Florida.
That's right.
So yeah, that's just great resources. So thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, and I was just saying, just stories. You got to be able to tell stories, and that's what the purpose of creating this brain map was about Devin Crosby, who's the athletic director at Lynn University. He and I were here together during my first stint at Kent State University. He's the deputy athletic director. He often talked about stories and just being able to tell those and how people cling to stories and they can track stories and they can understand the outcomes if you're able to attach a story to a question that you're asked.
Yeah, Sunshine State Conference. I used to be in the Sunshine State. So some people, I remember when he went to Lynn, like, why would he go to Lynn? I'm like, you ever been there? That campus is nice, and it is in a nice area of Florida. So
right.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, let's shift to you're about to approach 1 year, I believe, like May 1st or something.
May 1st, yeah.
You got introduced on my birthday, April 9th. And so I saw that on your bio. So next time on my birthday from now on, I'll just be thinking about you.
I appreciate that.
Kent State. So has becoming an AD been what your expectations were? Because sometimes we want to get this goal and then you get that goal and you're like, all right, this isn't what I thought it was going to be, or now what? Because that is a big part of having a goal and you accomplish it. What next? So how did you kind of think that first year? Is it the same as what you're hoping it'd be and more?
I think the comment that I had my first time was that you don't know what you don't know. So you just hit what's in front of you. That's where it is. Like, so the first thing for me is always going to be foundation, so setting a mission, vision, and a guiding principle for our department was paramount. And it's been huge because, Travis, I go back to that every time in everything that we do. So I can't say that it has been what I expected or hasn't been what I expected. My focus has mainly been on how do I show up each and every day as the best leader I can be for the impact in the places that I'm going to have the impact. And it's keeping in mind, leadership isn't what happens when you're in the room. Leadership is what happens when you're not in the room, right? So making sure that I do my best to set this vision, this mission, this guiding principle, and then articulate it to the highest accord. Because when we're in a space, we can say the same word. If I talk to someone about leadership, if I talk to someone about being good servants, if I talk to people about, being competitors, we all share a different definition of what that word truly means. So I was listening to something from this guy named Tim Kite, and I got it from Chris Finwood. He's the baseball coach over there at ODU, and I consider him a friend and an extreme colleague. Tim Kite talks about this thing called a performance pathway. And it says, leadership drives culture, your culture drives your behaviors, and your behaviors drive your results. So with me in the leadership from our exec team to our overall leadership team and to our head coaches, these are the leaders of the highest accord. I had to make sure that we understood the importance of leadership. Then it went into, okay, here's the culture that we're trying to create at Kent State University and within Kent State athletics. So now here are the behaviors that we want to reward and recognize. So we begin to share a definition of what it means to be a front-facing, service-oriented department and sharing those examples. Because once we share those examples, that's what they mean by culture. That's what they mean by servitude. That's what they mean by presence. That's what they mean by leadership. Now that is going to drive the behaviors of other people who want to aspire towards growth within the department. Once you have that type of movement in the same direction, now you're going to yield your results. So that's been the biggest piece about this year. I would say the biggest surprise has been realizing the role that I play on President's Cabinet. And it was interesting, Travis, we always look for associations to make things more commonplace to us. So when I got to ODU, one of the best things was I wasn't on Wood Selig's, Dr. Camden Wood Selig's senior staff as a person who oversaw compliance, academics, and student athlete development. I was a leader on Wood's senior team who happened to oversee a unit. I wasn't a person of a unit who then byproduct, you're a leader. And that was paramount for me. So then understanding that when I got here to Kent State University as the athletic director, well, then I'm on the president's senior leadership team as a campus leader. And then we have to align everything we're doing in terms of the mission, vision, and values of the university to move on one accord, right? So that to me was the biggest revelation in seeing how I needed to show up and educate and communicate to our staff about the role and the why of college athletics or athletics on a college campus. Nowhere in the world do you have this set up. So what is that reason, that purpose? Is to move forward the brand and mission of the university, to bring that type of attention, that spotlight here, so people can see all that we offer in terms of education to really change the society, right? That's the idea of the critical thinkers that we're trying to develop, first access, develop, and then grow so they can be leaders of tomorrow.
Yeah, I think it's important to get more presidents on the podcast too, to explain that of what they look for in an athletic director to be on the cabinet, because I've been fortunate to have three on here and really enjoyed having UT Martin and Coastal Carolina. They're great guys and people I can ask questions to about the presidency. So, but it's they critically, I mean, schools like them see athletics as a critical component. So I think you should have your athletic director on there. That cabinet, because it's just so important. You
It's a
know,
big piece. And you talk about retention. I mean, that's the name of the game these days, whether we talk about the transfer portal, we talk about enrollment. You can have as big enrollment numbers as you want, but if you aren't moving these young people towards graduation and completion, well, then they're going to do a value proposition of the college degree. And is this worth it? And what does it yield, right? Athletics has the power to make people feel connected to a brand. You have these champions right there on your campus. That's why you have a mascot. That's why you have a logo. That's why you have a fight song. You're trying to attach people to a new community and a new culture. And that is a huge role of athletics. This is where memories are formed. When you look back, a lot of the education happens outside of the classroom, and athletics plays a huge role in that, especially if we instill that pride and connectiveness to a student come from a different state, a different community, different principality. We're trying to become one, and here we are, one as Golden Flashes. So we talk a lot about Flash family. That extends beyond these athletics walls. So again, we just talk about the purpose of athletics on the college campus.
Yeah, a lot of scholars that listen to my podcast, they get kind of, I think, worn out on the term about how athletics can drive enrollment and it attaches things. And I get it. But looking at myself, for example, someone put out yesterday was IU day. And so someone put in the Big Ten Network account put out saying, who is your first favorite Hoosier or something like that. And I was like, I'm an IU grad, and I was thinking about as a kid, you're either an IU or Purdue person around Indianapolis, where I'm from. And I thought back to Jared Jeffries. Back whenever IU went to the championship game and lost to Maryland, I watched it as a kid and cried when we lost. And two of my cousins went to IU. I went to my first unofficial college visit in middle school to IU, and then saw AJ Moye, another basketball legend. And I was like, man, if I didn't have those cousins go to IU and those attachments, I don't know that I would want to try and end up going to IU and then working here one day. And it's like that for a lot of people. So it might not be mass scale enrollment numbers to look at, but I mean, you're right. You instill those memories. You can see behind me, there's another wall in front of me where my 6-year-old just draws IU logos all the time. And it's an attachment because he likes sports and he knows I work here. And so, I could see why your community involvement is really important.
Yeah, we're tribal in nature. At one point in time for the human race is part of survival. We all want to be part of a group in a community. That's just where we are. I mean, Batman has a signal for a reason. This is an identification of what you attribute to the values that signal puts off. This is how we are. Listen, Coca-Cola and McDonald's are still putting out commercials because they work. Their brand is still important. So anytime you see a brand out in the space, it has an impact. This is the reason behind brands. If they didn't matter, we wouldn't have an American flag, right? This idea of nationalism, this idea of being attached, a part of something, is beyond what these values say to us as we see them as an image. So again, I understand that sometimes it begins soft science or soft calculus, but we do know it does yield, because if it didn't, why would the biggest corporations in the world invest so much money and resources in it?
That Batman sign for a reason thing. That needs to be a slide deck for a presentation with the Flashes logo. That's a good one. I never heard that one, but that's a good point. I might steal that.
No doubt. Hey, listen, it's all good information
Randale
put out to the world. Yeah, that's right.
Well, let's move to one of the things that you just announced, naming rights. You all just announced a long list of naming rights to your facilities to kind of, show appreciation. But for those that may look to do something like that, can you maybe just walk them through what you all did? And then what's the behind the scenes process and decisions you have to make when doing something that big on a campus?
To me, it comes down to aligning people's passions with our purpose, right? Hey, if you have a passion for student access, if you have a passion for completion, if you have a passion for diverse generation, if you have a passion for this sport or that sport, or you have a passion for leadership, here's all the things that we have in our purpose. Our mission statement, as we adjusted it, it is to graduate student athletes boldly prepared for life after sport and win championships. That's where we're at. When we talk about our guiding principle, is to be student-centered, coach-led, and administrator-supported. Once you see these things, you hear these things about purpose and what we're looking to do to create the best leaders of tomorrow, because at some point in time, that identity of being a student athlete changes. We're not dream killers. Doesn't matter it's 2 months or it's 20 years like Tom Brady. At some point in time, you transition to life after sport. We want our students, our young people, boldly prepared for that transition as they become the leaders of tomorrow. As we're putting our brand out there and our purpose out there and being an institution of second chances and how we grow people so they can become great, right? There are people who have a passion for that out there. Now they hear our purpose, and our job is to align that together, because it's a triple win situation. They feel great because their passion is being met. We have young people who are benefiting from their philanthropy coming back to the university, and then our purpose is being fulfilled. Like, there's no greater connection that you can imagine in terms of aligning passion with purpose. So that's what we did in terms of the naming opportunities. And we really took advantage of our bowl game under Coach Sean Lewis and where we were in the trajectory and opportunity for him to return here to Kent as we're going in an amazing direction. You know, having the MAC Player of the Year on that side, and then for basketball, having the MAC Player of the Year on the men's basketball team, and having the Coach of the Year. So this is the first time in Kent State history that we've had both of these sports going at this trajectory at the same time. So we begin to tell that story and what it needed. Like, we have this culture here at Kent that you come here and you really feel a part of family. What we're missing are some things in brick and mortar. And we talked about this is the next stage for the next era. And, you know, we had a group of donors who came with us on that trip. And at a dinner, I just pitched what we were looking to do to them. And I said, I want this to be the most prominent era of Kent State athletics. Selfishly, I want that. I want this people to look back and say, oh my God, what it could have been like to be a part of that buildup of Kent State athletics to who they are today. But I told them, just as my wife often tells me when I get home, it doesn't matter what I want. You know, it matters what they want, because this is the group is going to take their resources, their friends, their networks to see this come to fruition. And once we had that information out there, we found what their passions were and began to align them with our purpose. And there were some special namings in there. And then now when people see the names that we got associated with living in perpetuity in our buildings, now they want to be a part of that crowd, because they say, okay, now it's not just me. I'm going to be a part of this group leaning into this passion and purpose. And now it's special. So that's how that came about. We got great people working behind the scenes, identifying, you know what I mean, who are going to be a part of this group, from Maggie McKendry, who leads up our philanthropy area, to our coaches. I mean, they are the CEOs of their program. They got in this to coach young people. Now they're in this to run an organization. So getting them out there and their brand out there to the highest accord has been important. And then their work ethic as well. So it's always a team approach with these things, but that's pretty much the fabric of how they came about.
Tactically speaking, is it quite a process to actually get the naming approved? Like, what does the board have to approve those? Is the president? I mean, I know you're not like the philanthropy person in the department, but I know that you would know that answer.
Yeah, we all are philanthropy people. At this time, that's how it works out, how you engage someone. But yes, it has to get board approval because, you know, we are on the institution of higher education. We have these spaces, but they aren't our spaces, right? So it has to be a process of name, because there needs to be a continuity across campus for the value of things, you know. So this idea of alignment, it starts in the most nuanced areas all the way to the top of the larger areas, i.e. naming a building and a space.
Yeah, because I had Amanda Braun from UW Milwaukee, or Milwaukee Athletics as we brand it. But they were going through a process where they were either deciding between names or corporations. And higher education is very critical of putting logos, corporate logos on campus, because even ones that were approved, it was just the name. It wasn't the logo. And so you're better off maybe getting a bang for your buck if finding people that are, you know, wanting to invest in your program from a naming perspective that have a tie. So I just like to get tactical on that. So thanks for, you know, kind of diving in on that. Mm-hmm. You know, the MAC is one of my favorite conferences. It's just, I've gotten to meet several of the ADs in the MAC. One of those is, I'm really excited for Brian Blair. So Brian's awesome. He's been an awesome resource for me, giving me a lot of good book recommendations over the years. He's going to do awesome at Toledo.
He is an amazing human being, man. That is my guy.
He's awesome. Another MAC AD that was one of my favorite guests I've ever had on, and one of the early guests, was Julie Cromer at Ohio. And Julie's a former IU administrator. We didn't cross paths when we were here, but having a conversation with her, not surprised she's on the transformation committee, co-chair with her experience of NCAA governance before she got into the AD chair. And, you have this background in compliance and understanding governance model. So thinking about the transformation committee, what are your expectations as an athletic director of what's going to come out of the transformation committee?
Yeah, Julie Cromer, man, I am a huge fan, always have been, from Ncaa, IU, Arkansas. I've been able to see how she's led and, the impact that she's had at a national level. I'm a huge fan, always have been. So knowing that she's right there co-piloting where we're going to end up, I feel very confident. And I am so ecstatic that she's there in the MAC, so we can have an opportunity to tap into her vision and expertise and leadership. So I'm a huge fan of Julie, have been for over a decade now. So I feel good about what she's got going on. And with that, I don't know what this is going to end up being. And I remember this question being asked about what will the NCAA be here in the next 1 to 5 years, 1 to 10 years on the interview. And I said, I don't know, to be quite honest. And this is going to be our flying wedge if you look back on the history of how the NCAA changed in terms of safety and rules and regulations from the Teddy Roosevelt presidential days. That flying wedge was the creation of the NCAA, the transformational moment of change, right? This is our flying wedge. This will be a transformational, complete moment of change. And I don't think any one person or institution is going to be like, that's exactly what I wanted to happen. I think it's going to be, okay, this is the new space. This is the new area. How do we define it moving forward? So when I answered that question, I said, I don't know exactly what it's going to be, but one thing that's going to remain the same is our purpose and our mission: to graduate student athletes, boldly prepare for life after sport, and win championships. Whatever landscape that's going to be in, whatever that new wave looks like, whatever category an FBS institution like Kent State or an institution within the Mid-American Conference will line up in, that purpose is going to remain the same. So it's a thing about you evolve or you dissolve, right? So we're going to have to evolve for whatever it is going to be as we move forward. But so long as we keep that student centered and that purpose in line, then we'll navigate whatever the new space is.
Yeah, it's just I was reading the documents from the meetings the other day, and focusing mostly on they're about to put obviously they tabled legislation, but then also I come from a D2 background, so I'm interested in these schools that are looking to go D2 to D1, and basically they're getting ready to put a moratorium, and and if you're in the hopper to get to D1, you're gonna have to meet whatever the new requirements are. And so it's interesting to see there's big splash from D2 to D1. And, some people when the transformation committee comes out might have wished they go back. And so it's the whole thing's just going to change. And will we see subsets of divisions added again? Are we going to see will people matter if we go back to the letters after the number one, things like that. And so just what does it mean? So it's just it's interesting to get people's perspectives. It's not the only thing going on. I feel like there's just so many, and we'll get to that in a second. But the next one I want to tackle is transfer portal.
Yes.
Just kind of curious, once again, understanding the compliance side of things too, as an AD, how do you expect the transfer portal to play into head coach evaluations and then decisions to make hires or firings? Will it become a skill set for coaches, being how they can work the transfer portal? And I must say, I think I stole this question from D1 Ticker's Twitter account that he put a vote out. So I just I was like, I got to ask this one. That was a good question.
Yeah, no, it is a great question. To me, retention is the name of the game. Continuity is the name of the game. And those things happen because of culture. If we deal in a transactional relationship, we're always going to have a transactional relationship. There's always going to be a bigger, better transaction that's out there. And that's just the general workforce, right? And we have people who stay at different places for a reason, not of transaction, not mostly, is of culture. It's of belonging, and it's of being fed and feeling seen, heard, and valued, and having an impact in their space. I think I just finished the book, The Best Place to Work. And now I'm looking to my left because I have it up here. Got this one from Drew Turner. First, break all the rules. The world's greatest managers do what the world's greatest managers do differently, and getting into that space. And it talks about these indicators of great companies and organizations. And a lot of it has to do with a person and employees belonging in this space. And I think that's the same for our student athletes. When we look at coaches, who are the culture builders, who have people who understand development and retention? I look at Villanova, and Jay Wright has been one of my favorite coaches in the space for college basketball for when I know of him. And he didn't have all the best research all the time, the largest brand all the time, but they had something about continuity. They didn't do it all with one and dones. There's something about that culture there that he was able to be one of the greatest college basketball players of all time. As we move forward, Travis, that's where I think this begins to go. Will there be transactional engagements? 100%. But I think the yield of great successful teams and departments is going to be based off the culture that you can create that returns that talent to your institution.
Has any indication from your fellow ADs in the MAC or just around your colleagues at Division I level with, now that we've gone through the transfer portal, a round of both football and men's basketball, which is, I mean, there's transfers from every sport in there, but primarily those two get the attention. Are there concerns about the size and what can be done with that? Is there anything that can be done about that? What's kind of the conversation in a room full of athletic directors about the transfer portal, thinking about besides the coaching hires that I just said?
It's all over the place. And again, I think this thing will find its balance, like anything else in the free market. It finds its balance. It's brand new. It's exciting. You know, you have your freedom. The grass is greener on this place, et cetera, et cetera. But, you know, right now, I don't think that group of students and young people have some of those stories where, hey, here's how many people are entering the transfer portal. Here's how many people didn't get the opportunities that they thought they were going to get because of it. You know what I mean? So I think those stories are starting to come out. I imagine that we'll have this leveling over the next few years. Now, that's just my perspective. Other ADs don't feel that way, and they do feel different pressures associated with it. You know, I think the biggest thing that people want are parameters, predictability. Is there a time where you have to let people know that you're transferring? Is there a time where you can bring in people who are looking to transfer? And just having those structures put in place. You know, with this thing, the only thing that's inevitable is change. So I think people are ready for the change, and they prepare for it every day in their sport, quick change opportunities to be successful. So that's not necessarily as much of the issue as it is when these things happen and the predictability surrounding when these things happen. I imagine something like that will come out through the transformation committee.
Yeah, one concern I've always had is the speed at which you need to get things out versus when you're trying to do a transfer evaluation, you still have to hit percentage of degree, that you're going to run into hurdles, and it's hard to get those done in time and be able to make it so that the student is aware of all their options. So I think just the timeliness of being in there, and because you're back to recruiting again. So it's just like you're recruiting against other schools. So you're right, though, it'll find its balance at some point. You know, I tell people the transfer portal itself. So like I study higher education, I'm in a higher ed program. If higher education had the transfer portal for just general students, they would probably love it because it is very efficient, because you can put stuff in there to like answer questions. You can know where someone went. A lot of times, even the government doesn't know where you went until you actually request a loan or something. So it's just, it is a very good process and a very good system. It's just people aren't happy with people going in and out of it. But when you look operationally, the NCAA and Susan Pearl, they did build something really good. The one thing that would be cool is if students could put their transcripts and syllabi into it directly, but then you open up FERPA rules and things like that. But just the operation itself, like you almost have to marvel at it whenever higher education can't figure out the transfer thing, because they have a transfer problem, a student swirl as they call it, but they don't really have a good way to track it. At least now with the transfer portal, you can track students and the other schools can matriculate. So people might not like the portal. The only other concern that I was wondering if ADs have is media having access to the leaking things, and whether that could be other people, obviously in departments leaking it. Is there a conversation about that too? About, you know, how are these names getting out there so quick into the Twitterverse?
Oh, that's the world, right? Information and access to it. So to me, you know, it's one of those things where you control what you can control. Those things you can't control. You can control your environment. You can control how you recruited people. You can control your idea of playing time. You control your scholarships. You control the culture you create. You control the hires you make. These are the things that you have a control over, and you control how you engage people. So for me, you control the vision you set, right? So for me, it's more focusing on that. Just because a person's name gets in the portal, my question is more so, well, what has been the communication to this point? That's where, because that's something that you, again, also control. And it works to your benefit sometimes as well, because if you didn't know a person was going to be on the board and they happen to fit what you're doing in terms of culture and, playing style, well, then now you're going to have an opportunity to evaluate to see whether that young lady or that young man is going to fit your systems. So these things are all evolving in terms of markets and charts. And you just have to figure out the new wave of it. And I think for us being a mid-major, hey, if we have a person who performs at a very, very high level, well, they're going to have an opportunity, to go beyond at Kent State University. But we also get those people who are at a high level and say, you know what, that didn't fit me, whether it's that environment or it's the playing time. So we get those students who transfer over to us. We also get students from a D2, from a Division I non-FBS to say, you know what, I think I have an opportunity at a Kent State and it makes sense. So I think we pull from a number of different areas, and people who transfer right across in terms of power P5 as compared to the group of 5 institutions. So I know coaches don't often want to hear that, but I think we benefit more than we don't. But it really does hurt when you lose that top performer. And I get that. Okay, that is part of the new reality. How are we ready and preparing to adjust?
That's great. We talked about a couple of the recent challenges that are ahead or what's going on. There's a lot of things going on. I think any given year, one of these things would take up the whole year. We haven't even really talked about NIL.
Yeah.
And so just kind of thinking about how are we doing as an industry in prioritizing all these things? And then how could we be better at prioritizing all these things?
Yeah, I wouldn't say we're doing well. We are one big machine and engine. The Ncaa is us. We are the Ncaa. Though we've appointed leaders within those spaces to offer direction and guidance. So I think the Austin case has shot a jolt of urgency into all of us to figure out how we are going to set the parameters of what we're going to look like moving forward. So I wouldn't say that we've been great in being proactive in the past, but it is a large group of people that we're all trying to get moving in the same direction. But I think we have an urgency now. So we have the transformation committee. We have a president of the Ncaa. So we're going to prioritize these things different. I think that's why they've paused a lot of the legislation that was looking to come through. And, we'll see what these things begin to look like, but we do need to take hold, get on one accord, because if we don't make our decisions for ourselves, someone else is going to make it for us. And that's never a good position to be in.
Yeah, I feel like there's a lot of backlash, and I think we all knew there was going to be on the Constitution thing about how slow that went in the vote. But hopefully, the Transformation Committee was really the way for the work. The Constitution thing was just like a formality of introducing the ability to do something like the Transformation Committee. And I feel like there's just been a lot of criticism, rightfully so, in a lot of areas. That's not really one of them. If you just understood that the Constitution was one thing just to open up doors. But and I have no doubt. You look at the two co-chairs of Julie, as we talked about, and then Greg Sankey. Those are two people that they're not going to keep it steady. They're going to actually dig in and look at this because they are very much people I've followed for a long time, and I think we all know they're gonna push for change, and they're not gonna just keep it steady. Do you think NCAA or conference offices should have a think tank, or at least for an athletic department to have a person or two dedicated to looking at a SWOT analysis of all the issues in the future? Now, the reason I asked this, I just got done reading the latest Amazon book, and they have a team inside there with all their companies where all they're doing is they're looking at the future of opportunities and challenges and trying to be creative. And I wonder if a think tank, we see them in governance and policy, but college athletics hasn't really had one that's from a practitioner side. Mm-hmm. We've had Knight Commission and people like that, but we don't really have one that's for the practitioners that are going to be pushing the changes.
Yeah, I think they've done it behind the scenes with different lobbyists or different access with government relations and community relations on your own particular campuses. Lead One is serving as a great role in that space, I think, right now. So shout out to Tom McMillan and his group who are helping out with FBS especially. But the short answer is yes. there needs to be a consortium of people. And I think that's what the transformation committee is. So I think we're going to see more of that as we move forward from commissioners levels to Power 5 to Group of 5 to Division 2 and Division 3. I think we're going to see more of that and more of an ownership at the conference level in terms of how we are setting rules, regulations across the board and where people fit financial investment into different sports and opportunities. So I think we're going to see a lot of that ownership being taken at that local conference level, but then putting together the super friends in a way at the larger level of the NCAA, because again, we are the NCAA. It hasn't felt that way maybe for some people, but if we don't start to take that type of ownership, we're going to continue to be in this oasis of confusion.
Well, the last question, it kind of surrounds that too, and then I'll close it out, is NIL companies. We've had communication companies, digital companies that it's been more advantageous for athletic departments to partner with than just be able to hire people internally to do this. And so there's a lot of other areas to do this too. As more issues face the industry and money in departments remains tight, and you're just trying to pay the staff you have and keep the staff that you do have, especially coming out of COVID, bad time to have all these challenges when you have a lot of money issues with that. Do you expect departments to continue just partnering with outside companies and kind of outsource these things, whether it's companies or contractors, instead of just trying to handle everything in-house so that maybe you can be more nimble?
Like anything else in life, you'll see a balance. There will be those who want to, if you do the same thing you always did, you get the same thing you always got, right? You're going to have that perspective from different places. And it just depends on what their culture and their environment is going to be. And if they see a yield there, or if they have other critical matters that they want to have their hands on, but they need to outsource other things. So I think you're going to see all type of different approaches. And then you're going to see a cycle of that approach, like a pendulum swing, jump to the other side, because the leadership changes as well along the way, from the board level to the president level, all the way through to the leadership, i.e. AD level. So you're going to see all type of different approaches in that space. And it's going to be incumbent upon what that institution has gone through in the past and what they're going through right there in that moment. But having these other different experts and people within the industry is not a bad thing. It gives you other options to choose what direction that you may want to go in. And if there are different places who have different resources and education and information or a different yield that they can bring to you, is going to be great. But I think the bottom line to it all, Travis, is anything that you're presenting now, if it doesn't have a revenue generation approach to it, a revenue generation piece to it, it's not going to be anything that's going to move forward or get passed. Everything that we come up with, everything that we look to implement has to have some sort of revenue generating arm to it, because you're going to have that cliff of the students who are graduating high school here in 2025. There's going to be less high school graduates, therefore less college students being enrolled. What is going to be attractive about you? How are you going to find private, separate resources that are going to help sustain your department in this time that we're still trying to meet our purpose, right? Meet our missions, meet our values, and meet our goals. So if it doesn't have a revenue generation arm to it, you got to find some other type of purpose or private finance that you have to see it moving forward. So I think that's ultimately is going to be the focus. Whether you go internal or external, it's going to be based off your profitable analysis.
Last thing is you're entering year 2, about to be done with an academic year, going to hit the summer and start with a new fall. What are the goals for the department in 22-23 academic year for Kent State University?
Yeah, it's like building a house. This first year was a lot of motivation, inspiration, and ground pouring, right? You're pouring the cement, you're building the foundation of your home, because we all know the higher you go, the more flimsy it gets. So you're going to need a very, very strong foundation. So that's what we've been doing, sharing the language. Here's our mission: graduate student athletes boldly prepare for life after sport and win championships. Here's the guiding principle for how we're going to meet that mission: student-centered, coach-led, administrator supported. And here's a strategic plan that we put together. It was 70% cooked. Dr. Kathy Wilson's been an FAR here for 18 years. That's faculty athletic representative for those who don't know. Had about 70% down the line. Greg Gloss, who's our senior deputy AD, we brought him back home from Texas Tech. They begin to co-chair that and get that on the board. So the exciting thing is we poured the concrete, we set the framing for our foundation. Now it's time to start building up on that house, right? Get some siding up, start building in the interior. So that's really exciting. That's going to be these categories, these actionable principles within our strategic plan. So I'm beyond excited about, year two. Year one, you come in, you're doing your assessments, you're leading people, you're trying to get them to share a language about where we're going, right? To jump on board of this mission, this vision, and our values. And once we have that going, now here are the tangible, tactical things that we want to see start to take form in year two. So my comment, we're going to do a recap. Hey, here was year one. Here's where we were. Here's where we currently are. And here's the things that we're going to need to do to get where we all want to go. And here's how we do it together. Right. And that starts to be the tangible pieces of your strategic plan. That's the boring stuff for people. But for me, it's very exciting because they're clear directions and marching orders, and we all play a role in them. So now you see how you fit into this machine of our purpose. So that is what year two is going to be. And again, we got a lot of people coming back in terms of coaches, in terms of student athletes, in terms of staff. So I'm really excited about that. And people who've been here just for a year, now they're getting a full vision of what their role is going to be. And they're sharing the definitions that we're putting out there.
Randale Richmond, Director of Athletics, Kent State. Thanks for being on Higher Ed Athletics.
Sure. Appreciate you, Travis.